Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Leslie presents. And now your host, Paul Leslie.
Hola to John Goodwin.
Hello.
How's it going?
Going good.
All right, we're going to talk about two of your albums today, State of the Artist and Thorny.
All right.
First of all, tell us a little bit about how you discovered music.
Well, more like music discovered me. I mean, when I was a kid, teenager, the radio, was ever present, and a lot of stuff on there touched me. So I think, as with most singer-songwriters, you kind of want to touch back with that same intensity and that same language that touched you. So I just started to write and sing and play and kind of create that kind of joy in my life that I got from listening to the radio and records in those days.
Back in those days, what kind of stuff did you listen to?
Well, when I was a kid, Elvis was breaking, and got into my early teenage years, and the Beatles were happening. So, I was totally into that. Everything that went along with that. The English invasion and the '60s music and the early '70s, and kind of grew up with rock and roll.
One of your songs, For Those Who Still Believe, has references to Jimmy and Lennon. Tell us about that song and some of the lyrics that are a little puzzling to me.
Sure. Well, the song, it was partially inspired by seeing the history of the '60s and the spirit of the '60s being rewritten and reinterpreted in the media, and almost like portrayed not exactly the way it happened. So a lot of people who weren't young in the '60s have an impression of it, but it wasn't really the impression a lot of people were there have. So I just got onto writing about, what I remember of it. And, the coast of California, Big Sur, Carmel, the whole music scene there, and how it passionately touched me as compared to how I see it presently portrayed, in the media a lot.
One of your songs has really kind of entranced me, and that's Rain of a Flower. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I wrote the song actually in a cafe in L.A. up at Beechwood Canyon. And I guess I was kind of in love with the waitress who used to bring me my coffee every morning. I began to think about her and life, and I'm always trying to, think about what's going on in my life in a given moment. And I realized that, one day, she'd be old and maybe wouldn't have the kind of magic that was attracting me to her at that moment. And I began to think about, we all get old and we lose some of the magic of our youthful appearance, just like flowers do. But the fact that flowers get old and eventually die didn't bring me any pleasure or relief or satisfaction. I wasn't, celebrating, the inevitable, even though I was contemplating it.
The strange girl in the song Strange Girl, is that a real person?
In a sense. I don't write a lot of fiction in my songs, so usually if you ask me, who the girl was or where the place was that I was singing about, I can tell you exactly. But in the case of that song, I wrote it in a hotel in Copenhagen one night, and the strange girl was just the spirit of this girl who I sensed more than an actual person, which is really rare for me. But I was sort of carried away by just the river of the poetry and the music that I was writing, and it became something that I couldn't resist, going along with it.
So, in a sense, the person was real, but based on your initial impression.
Yeah, I would say the person, it wasn't exactly a real person that I was singing to, whereas in most of my songs it is a real person I was singing to. But it was really just a feeling that carried me along. You know, sometimes we sort of go on like a vision quest, you know. We sort of walk in the wilderness not knowing what we're going to find, but we're so, you know, intrigued by the moment that we keep on going, and that's what happened with that song. And a lot of it, like, I was really there when I wrote it. I mean, I was totally, you know, visualizing the whole thing around me that I described in the song, even though, you know, physically I wasn't there.
Everybody knows the saying, is it true or false? There's a song on there entitled False or True. What made you decide to make it the mirror opposite of what first appears in our mind?
I just think that's kind of like where that phrase landed. I guess at the time I wrote it, I was really, you know, disillusioned with love and how sometimes our personal, like, sexual preferences are somewhat programmed by the culture and the mass media rather than, you know, by our, they sort of seem to override sometimes our just natural, intuitive sensibility, you know, in perceiving love or what we'd like to be loved, you know. So, in a way, I was writing that about almost like the programming of our tastes and values about the opposite sex. And at the very end of each verse, you know, I just seemed to want to say, you know, is this false or true? Like, do I lie, or do you see the light in what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Almost like you're questioning, is our interpretation our own, or is it because of what we've been subjected to?
Yeah, that's right. You know, we're given a certain impression over and over and over again in the media of what, you know, perfection is. And we see it on every newsstand, you know, from the time we're little. And I think sometimes it sort of distracts us from the point that perfection is more of an inner state than an outer standard.
The album art was painted by you. You spend quite a bit of time with another form of art, the visual arts.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your visual art experiences.
Sure. I kind of got hooked on it when I was very young, just the thrill of painting and doing something, or even pottery or mosaics, like just doing something that really turned me on and felt complete and spoke to me when it was done. And I also found that it spoke to other people too, because they had a strong positive response to it. So the visual arts I do it because it satisfies me so much, and you know, fortunately other people respond that way too.
And another one of your albums, Thorny, it looks like you. Is that you on the cover?
That's me on the cover.
Now, was that a photograph that you painted over, or did you really paint on your face?
I really painted on my face.
Oh, great.
I actually went out to do a photo shoot for different parts of that album booklet.
Uh-huh.
And just as an experiment, because I'm always experimenting artistically, I brought a bunch of face paint with me and went into the bathroom at the photographer's house and just painted my face and went out there, and, you know, she took a lot of pictures of me, and it just turned out to be something that people really liked and laughed at. I mean, some people were scared by it, but, you know, that's a painting. I washed it off when it was done. You know, it was very cool to do it.
That's interesting. Yeah, two forms of art in one.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way.
So, that's on the cover of your other album, Thorny, and you have, I think, 5 albums in all, right?
Well, 4 albums of new material and 1 album which was my attempt to take my favorite songs off of all 4 albums. Or actually, at that point, I recorded 3.
And you're in the Nashville area, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And there's one of your songs. I know that you lived out in Cali And one of your songs, I've assumed just from listening to it that it's autobiographical, and that's Why I Left L.A.
Yeah.
So tell us about that song.
Well, I wrote that song probably in about 93 or 94 when I was contemplating leaving L.A. I guess, as you can tell from the song, I was pretty disillusioned with L.A. at that point. And there was a coffee house that I used to go to every morning with my friends and have coffee at. I don't know, I began to, see, I don't know, like L.A. wasn't really producing the kind of music that turned me on for the most part, although there's always something being made that turns me on by the music industry. But L.A. it just seemed to be more pose and not genuine revolution in a positive sense. So I was just writing about it, and it all seemed to be taking place at that cafe. I've written a couple songs about that place, actually.
We played a song you wrote recently, as sung by Jeff Bridges, and that's Van Gogh and Hollywood, which is going to be used in a movie, Tideland.
Yes.
And the song has a very vivid opening. It really captures the listener from the beginning. Tell us about Van Gogh and Hollywood.
Well, Van Gogh and Hollywood came out of me thinking about, what happens when art meets commerce, or when pure art meets relatively pure commerce. I mean, I was thinking about what happens if Van Gogh comes to Hollywood, say he's a songwriter, and he presents these flamingly brilliant song canvases to the powers that be in the midst of all that they're doing. Like, what kind of reception would he have? And that's really where that song came from. It was kind of contemplating out loud in a rock and roll sense that kind of dilemma, that picture,
This is just kind of off the beaten path, but the more and more I listen to that song, and I listen to Jeff's song, Buddha and Christ at Large, I feel there are a lot of comparisons there. But, I guess, you can write something and then the listener has their own interpretation of it. Like when we were just talking with Michael McDonald, it's, you can write a song and to somebody else it can mean something totally different. I guess when I heard the song Vincent Van Gogh in Hollywood, I kind of thought of it as like, in some senses, I saw a lot of realism in it, but in another sense, I saw a lot of like the clashing of two things that are very different. In the sense that Van Gogh, I guess, is just in a class of its own, and Hollywood being what it is. You know what I mean? Like kind of an old and new.
I do know what you mean. I think Hollywood is capable of doing some amazingly wonderful things, and some, amazingly unwonderful things too. I mean, having lived in LA for so long, I'm aware of like the potential of LA and Hollywood, to give the world great things, which it has. I also think sometimes Hollywood may tend to err on the side of underestimating the intelligence of people outside of Hollywood. And sometimes I think like if they had a little more respect for the intelligence of people in other parts of the world, that they might, gear up the message level a little bit and just trust that people will get something that turns them on rather than give them something that they presume they're going to buy for whatever reasons,
It almost feels like they're neglecting a lot of people. It's like they almost just have this feeling like as long as some people are satisfied, that's good enough.
I totally agree with that. But the thing is, like, and it's weird to be defending Hollywood in any way, but there are a lot of very idealistic, like, screenwriters and actors and directors and producers like who really want to do something great, and fortunately they get a chance to do that. And there are a lot of people who are more like aiming for the demographics and the cultural conditioning within those demographics, and sort of playing on that, and they do that very successfully too.
And we were just talking about Jeff Bridges, and his album Be Here Soon has 3 songs you wrote. And one of those songs has, I noticed that the Rose makes several appearances in the lyrics of a lot of your songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one, is it Two White Roses?
Yes, it is.
Yes. There's songs every now and then that almost makes a person's, it almost demands someone's attention because the person singing it puts such a feeling into it. So tell us a little bit about Two White Roses and just a little bit about the symbolism there.
Sure. Well, Two White Roses is sort of, I sort of imagine myself to be like, a million miles away from the earth, looking at my situation and realizing that however large, things are, when you're looking at them, from the inside out, to look at them from a million miles away and try and imagine that, makes everything seem almost small, not really irrelevant, but it just gives you another perspective, when you see the world as just a twinkling little spot of glitter, suddenly everything that's bugging you or whatever, just, it takes on a whole other beauty, So that was the whole basis of that song. It was more like a little bit of space travel on my part.
And you and Jeff, have you two ever written songs together?
Yes, we have. And it's a wonderful time. We have the best time writing together, Since I moved to Nashville and he still lives in California, we get together 3 or 4 times a year. And, in the last few years we've sat down and we've written some songs that I just love.
I guess one thing I like about a lot of these songs is they almost feel like they're a glimpse into something private. I almost feel like it's something I'm not meant to read, but I somehow have this opportunity to look through the window.
Nice.
And I like that fact that they're kind of esoteric and, in one sense, they can range from the somewhat mysterious, and then like other songs like Rearview Mirror Kiss, where it's a story song. And I think that song kind of speaks to everyone because, everyone is at one point in their life is with someone, whether it's love or infatuation. They look, and that feeling of almost betrayal or rejection that they feel, or even brokenheartedness, was that autobiographical, or was it just, he sees the girl in the car and she's kissing the handsome boyfriend?
Yeah, that was totally autobiographical. About 4 years ago, I was completely infatuated with this woman, who I still know, and I think, she was dating an athlete here, and one cold winter night, as I was driving home from this club where a lot of people, used to hang out at that time, I was driving home from the club, and I got to the left-hand turn, the stoplight where I turned left to go to my house, and I'm looking in my rearview mirror, and she's in the car behind me with the guy she was dating, passionately kissing him. It's like cold, and I'm alone, and I'm looking there, and it's just the rearview mirror kiss.
Ouch.
I went home and wrote it.
Yeah. So it was an actual event.
Absolutely. It was amazingly actual.
I like songs that are the kind that almost break your heart when you hear them. and you get that feeling where your stomach is kind of, your stomach kind of sinks, and for some reason, even though it makes you feel a little bit sad, you listen to it over and over. And one of those songs is When I Believed in Love. Mm-hmm. And that song immediately was my favorite from the two albums. Mm-hmm. So tell us about When I Believed in Love.
Well, I'm somebody who, whether or not I'm involved with someone romantically, I always, need to believe that I am loving someone, however well or not I know that person. I always have at least one or two, three people in my heart who, inspire me, kind of give me the will to go on, as if there's as if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, But I guess at the time I wrote that, I just I've written several times in my life about not believing in love anymore. And it's sort of a poignant place to come from. So that was just a little musical autobiographical snapshot of one of those moments.
You have a website that people can get in touch with you and purchase your albums and look at some artwork. Tell us what the website is.
It's babyrecords.com, and I literally have somebody create the website for me in order to put my CDs on the site and also to display some art. I really believe that every artist, has a right to a gallery, and every songwriter has a right to an album. Every songwriter has an album in them, and I produced 4, so literally the site was built in order to make those available to people and to give me some kind of, small public profile out there.
Just out of curiosity, where did you get the idea for the Baby Records title?
Well, like a lot of things, it was kind of an impulsive decision. I guess I was trying to think of names for the record company. I ended up with 2, and went for Baby Records because I knew that as an independent label, which I own and am the only artist on at this point, that it would be kind of a baby in the world. So I just decided to call it Baby Records.
So what do you have going on at the moment, and what is coming out in the future?
Well, I have songs and movies that will be coming out, and I have some songs on commercial releases here, which I'd really feel better talking about after they're out,
Sure.
But things are good. Loving living in Nashville and writing with all the great writers here is just wonderful. And the movies, one of them is Tideland, of course, and the other is called The Moguls, and those are going to be out later this year.
I'll never stop asking this question.
Right.
What would you like to say to the world? This program goes out all over the world. There are people listening everywhere. What do you want to say to those people?
I would say, I hope your lives are getting better every day, and I hope that there's less hunger and poverty in the world every day, and less warfare, and more understanding between people, because we all can live together here. That's basically what I'd say. It's a very spontaneous answer. I didn't have any time to think about it, but that's probably it.
I'm sorry. I guess I should have given you some advance warning.
No, because I think, if I thought about it, I would say the same thing. I just hope, everybody's dreams come true, and they have, happy lives, and, find all the joy they deserve.
All right, you can check out more information about John Goodwin at www.babyrecords.com. Thanks so much for coming on the show, John.
Oh, thank you so much, Paul. I really appreciate the chance to talk with you.
All right, thanks.
Okay.